replacing, for example, a CEO may be the most important job a board has to do, particularly if that CEO is a founder or a family member and they sit on the board. So it creates challenges. And I experienced succession planning at KPMG. And there are plenty of examples where succession planning may be one of the most important decisions that's made by a board or by a chair or a chair and a board, and is very much the focus of shareholders and activist shareholders. So I think, for example, you're on the board at CBA when the business changed CEOs from Ian Narev to Matt Common. I think at Coles, the business changed CEOs from Stephen Kane to Leah Wickett. At Blackmores, just after Marcus Blackmore stepped down, the business was, and now you've been through a similar situation with PwC. So succession planning can be a massive distraction to an organisation. I'd love to get your reflections on what works, what are the challenges of succession planning, what works well, how do you think about candidates stepping up into those leadership positions, how do you think about the complexity of managing a succession planning process?
Yeah, look, it's clearly a very key moment for any organisation, regardless of your corporate structure, whether you're a partnership or a corporation or whatever. And I happen to have been through a few of them. And some of them have happened quickly and suddenly, like at CBA, where Ian stood down and we very quickly had to get a new CEO. Others you've had time to nurture and grow, like Leah, and as founders, as you said. So that there's a lot of complexities in it. So look, I think in an ideal world, most companies would prefer for a new CEO to come from their internal ranks, right? A candidate who's internal. So the only way that can happen, though, is if you've planned well ahead, often years in advance. So, yes, Leah becomes the new CEO at Coles. We don't then say, right, we don't have to worry about it now for the next 3 or 4 years. We'll worry about it down the track. No, we're straight on to, okay, who are Leah's successors, right? Who are the potential candidates? How do we develop them, grow them, and position them so that they are realistic options at the time when we do need to find a new CEO? So I think that's a really important role that the boards have, is to keep that focus on succession at any point in time in the cycle, not just before you need to find a new CEO. However, also too, I think in some cases, even if there are really strong internal candidates, boards often make the choice to explore external options as well. And the reason for that is usually just to make sure that they think they've got the best possible slate of candidates to decide from. Inevitably, I think in, some examples I've been involved on, I won't mention specifically, whilst there's been external candidates, we've eventually gone back to the internal candidates. But it was a good exercise to make sure that we weren't leaving anything off the table. So if I talk about internal candidates, I think, one of the hardest things to navigate, again, doesn't matter on your structure, is the reality that those candidates often have some deep loyalties. They've often got long histories and they've got some visible alliances, in the organisation. So the only way you can make sure you come up with the right answers, you have to run a very rigorous and fair process, right? With enough transparency that the outcome, once it's been made, is going to be accepted, including by those who weren't successful. And that's always often hard. You often see in a lot of organisations, the one who wasn't successful eventually leaves. So it's a tough thing to really keep that process as fair as possible and work on the basis that you hope that the ones who weren't successful won't leave.